Hey guys, my name is RJ, this is The Secret Stacks, and I was inspired to make this video after watching a video that Trina from Between Chapters did talking about cultural relativism in literature, and I definitely encourage you to check that out in addition or even before watching this, just because that's going to give you a much firmer foundation and a better definition of what cultural relativism actually is. I mean, it's a tongue twister to say, but my basic definition of it is essentially things that we may find unacceptable in our current time or culture. When we look back on previous cultures or quote unquote alien or different cultures, they may be part of their cultural norms and experiences, and what is unacceptable to us is normal for them. Now, you see this a lot in a historical context where something that was acceptable 10,000 years ago by humans. Trina uses the example of men taking much younger, like 12-year-old brides, something that would be disgusting in today's standards, but it was just a reality of life back then. And you encounter this a lot in literature, not just in historical fiction, but also a lot of fantasies based in medieval times, and uses their cultural norms as a foundation for their world building, which can lead to us readers encountering things that are harder to stomach. A big one, and jumping right to the most controversial point, is violence against women, whether it's physical, emotional, sexual, and that's something that's an ugly part of our history, and it's a history that gets adopted into a lot of works like Game of Thrones, for example. And it forces us as readers to examine ourselves in a way and looking at what we're reading and whether it's okay that we're reading this and how are we reacting to what we're reading, knowing that it's something that we're definitely uncomfortable with. And for me, that decision really comes down to, why is this particular point in a book? If we have a rape scene, why is it in there? I mean, we see way too often that violence against women is used as a lazy plot point, either to create conflicts between characters or present a difficulty for the character to overcome. But again, it is part of our dark history, and realistically is still a dark part of our present. Violence against women isn't something that stopped after the medieval times. It's still very much a part of culture, and while it's changed and while it's lessened, it is in no way disappeared. So I think that really forces us to really evaluate both our reading and what we're reading, how we're doing it, and how we're going to respond. Circling back to Game of Thrones, I think, is a really interesting way of looking at this, because George R.R. Martin definitely does not shy away from violence in any context in his books, but everything he writes does seem it seems organic to the story. It doesn't seem over the top in terms of it's part of the world that they live in, but that harshness has translated into the show in sometimes absurd and disgusting manners. In particular, last season of Game of Thrones, was at 5 or 6, I'm losing track of what season it is, but essentially they added, in particular with Sansa's character, a lot of violence against her that was not part of the original text. We're forced to examine, well, why is that in there? And it did not feel that it added anything to the show in terms of understanding the characters, understanding the dynamic, moving the plot forward. It just seemed like a lazy way to force character interaction and development, and really in ways that were done in the book so much better and so much more complexly, but they want to do it quick, they want to do it lazy in the show, and that's what they came up with, and they got a lot of backlash for it. Now, it's impossible to read anything, but especially cultural relativism, without bringing in your own personal experience into how you're reacting to something. For me, because violence against women is something that I find so completely disgusting, I react really negatively to it in what I read. And also, because I've seen it done poorly so many times in what I've read, that only reinforces my rejection of that when I read it. Now, someone who hasn't had that same experience may react in different ways. And that's where books, I think, are a really interesting opportunity to engage in really challenging material in ways that wouldn't be safe or possible in any real life context. It's important to understand that violence against women is a real thing, so I don't think it should be stripped from literature altogether, because if we ignore it, all that does is perpetuate the problem where people say it's not a reality. So it's good that it's reinforced that it is a fact both back then and currently now, and it could be a good thing in forcing readers to confront harsh truths. But that is a lot harder in sort of human to human settings, which is why historical fiction and fantasy struggle with this a little bit, especially in human fantasy stories where it seems too close to home, too real, because we can see ourselves or people that we love or just human beings in general in these situations, and that sort of forces a rejection or a revulsion to some of this reading. Versus something like sci-fi. I think sci-fi is a great opportunity and a great genre to get this cultural relativism experience in ways that are a little easier to digest and a little easier to evaluate less emotionally. Talk about especially the introduction of alien races, both alien races that are less advanced and more barbaric than where we currently are as human beings, but also more advanced who look at the humans that they interact with in sci-fi as being barbaric themselves. It's really interesting when you get both those lenses of cultural relativism because it's the 360-degree view, and because we're looking at alien races and also being looked at by alien eyes, it allows us to evaluate it more objectively and possibly allows for a little more interest and insight. That's why I think it's so funny when there's controversy in the sci-fi community right now where people want less diversity. They just want space pirates essentially in their sci-fi, which is absurd. I think sci-fi is the perfect genre for tackling diversity. Things like recently reading Ender's Game and the Ender's trilogy that comes after it, it is one of the most poignant, beautiful stories about acceptance and that struggle both to accept and understand alien races and through that lens the human race ourselves, which is sci-fi allows you to do that in a way that nothing else really can. So that's definitely something where I'd encourage everyone. That's why I love reading across genres, because you get so many different things that sci-fi can give you something a little different than fantasy, a little different than young adult. And it's just, that's when reading can become really powerful in both educational, in an outward perspective, and also an inward perspective that I think is really cool. But I'm curious what you guys think about this and how you react to reading tough subjects. So let me know down in the comments below. And until next time, see ya.